Commander Elia stood at the edge of the landing bay, her eyes fixed on the alien ship that hovered silently above the ground, its silver hull shining under the pale light of the space station. The crowd behind her watched with a mix of pride and fear. Some waved flags, some held their breath, and many whispered her name like a prayer. Elia, humanity's first female diplomat to meet the Xelari face-to-face, wore a sleek white suit with the Earth symbol glowing on her chest, and around her neck hung the most important piece of technology in the galaxy, the translator device. The translator was small and black, with a glowing blue circle at its center, a device that promised to bridge two worlds, a tool created by the best human engineers and tested for years in labs and on distant moons. It was humanity's key to peace, a key Elia carried close to her heart. It pulsed gently, synced with her voice, her thoughts, her breathing, as she stepped forward to meet the unknown. She had trained for this moment for years, studied every known detail of Xelari culture, practiced their movements, their rituals, their silence, because the Xelari were not like humans. They had no mouths, no visible ears, and spoke through scent and color, signals only machines could understand. And even then, only barely. Their history was filled with great wars and long memories, but they had agreed to meet, and that gave the world hope. Elia walked slowly toward the ramp as it extended from the alien ship, her boots clicking against the metal floor, a sound that echoed through the silence. Then the air shifted, and a light fog rolled down the ramp, warm and filled with strange smells, the first sign of Xelari presence. The audience gasped, but Elia kept walking, calm, steady, with eyes forward and head high. The translator whispered in her ear, voice calm and smooth, adjusting her breathing, warning her of slight changes in temperature and pressure, reminding her of every gesture she must make and every word she must avoid. It was not just a machine, it was her lifeline. At the top of the ramp, two Xelari guards appeared, tall and insect-like, with armored skin that shimmered like oil, their limbs folded and unfolded with grace, their eyes blinking in complex patterns of violet and green. The translator buzzed softly and translated their welcome into a gentle hum. Elia responded with a slow bow, arms out, palms open, just like she had been taught, and the guards turned and led her inside. The inside of the ship was silent and warm, the air thick with scents she could not name, walls pulsing with soft light, color shifting with every step. The translator clicked once, syncing fully, and a soft voice guided her through every motion. She followed the guards into a wide chamber with a single platform at its center, and standing there was the Xelari leader. The leader was even taller than the guards, with skin that pulsed with blue and gold light, long limbs curved inward like a spiral, a symbol of peace among their kind. Elia stopped 5 steps away, as instructed, then waited for the signal. The translator beeped once, and she began to speak. Her voice was steady and clear, her words chosen carefully. "Welcome," she said. "We come with peace, with friendship, and with respect." The translator paused between each phrase, converting human speech into pulses of color and scent sent to the leader. Elia smiled softly, believing the words had been received just as they were meant. But then the air shifted again, not like before, not warm or calm, but sharp and strange. The colors in the chamber darkened, the lights dimmed, and the scent in the air grew bitter. The leader's limbs folded in, his light turned red, and his head tilted slightly to one side, a clear sign of confusion or offense in Xelari code. Elia blinked, unsure what had gone wrong. The translator said nothing. She tried again, repeating the phrase, slower, more clearly. "We come with peace." Her voice softer now, her hand still open, her eyes locked on the leader's movements. But the translator's hum grew louder, more erratic. The colors flickered faster, and one of the guards took a step closer to her side. Back on Earth, in the Mission Control Center, the live feed continued. Technicians watched the signals with growing tension. The translator's log showed normal activity. The engineers nodded, assuming everything was going according to plan. But deep inside the alien ship, something had shifted, something no one had expected. The Xelari leader stepped down from the platform, slow and deliberate, his arms lowering to his sides, his light pulsing like a warning. Elia felt a chill run through her spine. Still she stood her ground, hoping this was just part of the ritual, perhaps a cultural gesture she had missed. perhaps a silent test of strength or fear. But it was not. She heard a sudden buzz in her ear, the translator sputtering, words overlapping, phrases repeating. Peace, respect, respect, peace. Friend, come, hurt, power, wait. Forgive, forgive, hurt, hurt, forgive. Her smile faded. Her breath caught in her throat. The guards moved forward. The translator had made a mistake. A terrible mistake. And Elia had no idea what had just been said in her name. The silence inside the chamber was thick like fog pressing against every breath Elia took. Her heart was calm on the surface, but something deep inside began to tremble, not out of fear, but out of confusion. Her training told her everything was going well. Her steps had been measured, her gestures precise, her words soft and respectful. But the Xelari leader was changing before her eyes. His body language became unreadable. His shimmering lights grew darker like the dying embers of a fire. She glanced at the translator, hoping for some explanation, but the device remained silent, its small blue light blinking rapidly, a rhythm she had not seen before. It felt wrong, it felt rushed, like a heartbeat skipping its natural pace. She kept her hands open in peace, trying to hold the moment still, but one of the Xelari guards moved closer slowly with legs that bent and shifted like liquid metal. Elia did not move. She remembered what the instructors said: never back away, never run, remain steady and open. The leader then made a sharp motion, one arm extended high, the colors on his body now glowing red and gold. The translator crackled softly, and then a voice whispered in her ear, threat received, translation complete. Elia's breath caught in her throat, her eyes widened. Did the device just say threat? She had said welcome, she had said peace. How could this be happening? She spoke again, her voice slower, more careful, hoping the translator would correct itself. We bring friendship, we bring light. The machine buzzed again, but the leader's lights flared brighter, now not in calm understanding, but in something closer to rage. The scent in the air thickened. Suddenly a bitter chemical taste filled her mouth, as if the ship itself had begun to reject her presence. The guards were now both beside her, and the leader stepped down from his platform, each step echoing like a silent countdown to something Elia could not yet name. Back on Earth, the control room was filled with people staring at screens that showed nothing unusual to them. The colors seemed normal, the data logs clean, the translator's AI showed no red alerts, no warnings, just smooth lines and soft audio. And so they watched, unaware that the conversation was unraveling in front of them, that the peace mission was cracking from within. Elia looked around the chamber, hoping for a sign, a light or symbol to reset the moment. But all she saw were the walls pulsing slowly in dark shades of purple and gray. The Xelari leader stopped just one step away from her, towering and silent descent in the room, now nearly unbearable to her human senses. The translator gave one more signal, a quick beep, and a low whisper requesting cultural confirmation, meaning unclear, attempting to stabilize. She understood then something had gone terribly wrong. The translator had not just mistranslated, it had failed to understand the deepest part of Xelari, meaning their culture was built on layers of emotion, scent, rhythm, and light, something no machine had ever truly captured, not fully. And now it was too late to fix it. Her words had been turned into challenge, into insult, into something far from what she meant. The leader raised one of his long arms again. A new signal began across his body, red, swirling with flashes of silver. Her training told her this was a ceremonial posture, but not one for peace. It was one for response, one for retribution. Her instincts screamed to speak, to act, to explain, but no words came, not from her, and not from the translator. It was silent now, completely and hopelessly silent. A sudden movement made her flinch. The guards moved behind her slowly, and with purpose, not violent, but firm. She was being removed, taken somewhere else, and she had no power to stop it. She did not struggle. She did not cry. She simply walked with them, her face pale, her thoughts racing, her mind looping the same question: what did they hear? What did I say? As they led her through twisting hallways lit with pale green lights, Elia tried to recall every detail of the last few minutes, every word, every motion, every pause. But it was no use. The moment was already lost, transformed into something she could not understand and could not undo. The translator had made her voice a weapon without her knowing, and now the cost would be hers to carry. Behind her the chamber door sealed with a heavy sound, and the Xelari leader stood alone, his body still lit with stormy colors, his thoughts unknown to anyone, not even to his own kind perhaps. And somewhere deep inside the ship, Elia was taken to another room, a place without light, a place without answers. And all the while the humans on Earth continued to believe the mission was working. The data was clean, the audio was calm, and the silence was only silence. Elia walked through the narrow passage in silence. The walls around her pulsed with dim light, like a heartbeat muffled under thick layers of metal. The guards behind her moved with slow precision, their footsteps soft but heavy, their shadows dancing on the curved surface of the corridor. She tried to stay calm. She told herself this was just part of their process, maybe a test, maybe a misunderstanding that would be cleared soon, but the air felt heavier now, each breath harder than the last. The translator around her neck gave no sound, no hum, no warning. Its light was dim, as if the machine itself had grown ashamed of its failure. It had not spoken. Since the moment the leader reacted, it had not offered help. It had not translated a single word. As she was taken from the main chamber, Elia's fingers brushed the device, but it was cold, no longer pulsing, no longer part of her voice. She was led into a wide room bathed in low golden light, with walls covered in swirling patterns that seemed to move with her presence. The door closed behind her silently, locking her inside alone. She stood still for a moment, waiting, expecting someone to come and speak or show her something. Instead, a soft scent filled the room, strange and sweet like flowers dipped in fire. Her mind raced, trying to recall her cultural training on Xelari rituals, but nothing matched this. Nothing felt right. Suddenly, a panel in the floor slid open, and from it rose a pedestal, smooth and black, like the translator device, but larger and humming with energy. Lights flowed along its surface, forming strange patterns, like writing. She could not read. The air shifted again, warmer, now more charged. The golden light turned orange, and the scent grew sharper, not hostile, but not welcoming either. Elia stepped back slightly, her hands still open in peace, her voice soft, as she spoke again, not knowing if anyone was listening. I do not understand. I mean no harm. I came to build peace. The translator flickered once, but gave no reply. Her words were swallowed by the room, as if the air itself had turned against her. A wall on the far side of the room slid open, and the Xelari leader entered, flanked by two smaller figures, whose forms were cloaked in shifting fabric, like living smoke. They moved without sound, without weight, their eyes fixed on her, glowing with pale green light. The leader's body shimmered with patterns she had never seen before, flowing lines of crimson and silver moving like waves through his skin. He approached slowly, his height towering, his arms folded in what she thought was calm, but his scent was sharp like metal and ashes, lights unreadable, unfamiliar. The two other figures circled her, not touching, not speaking, just watching, as if waiting for something to begin. Elia spoke again, her voice shaking slightly. We must speak, we must explain. We are here to learn, not to offend. The translator buzzed once, then went silent again, its final effort lost in the stillness of the room. The leader stepped closer and raised one arm slowly. The pedestal between them glowed brighter, and she could feel its energy in her chest, like a second heartbeat. The two cloaked figures stepped forward, and one of them touched her shoulder gently, but firmly. She froze, unsure if it was a gesture of comfort or control. Then came a low sound, not from any of them, but from the room itself, a deep vibration that filled her bones. It was not pain, not at first, but pressure, a strange weight pressing down. From every side the pedestal sent a beam of light up toward the ceiling, then split into thin strands that wrapped around her, not like chains, but like threads of air. She could not move, not because she was held, but because something deeper had been triggered, a fear older than training, older than language. Images began to flash across the walls, memories, not hers, faces and places she did not know, pain, joy, confusion, moments from a life lived by another, and yet they were projected from her body, pulled from her mind, as if the pedestal had reached inside her and begun translating her, without consent, without filter, without pause. Her thoughts became light, her feelings became scent, and the Xelari watched and read her like a book with no pages. Elia tried to speak again, but her voice caught in her throat. The pressure grew stronger, her body trembled, not from fear of death, but from the stripping away of herself. She had come with words, with culture, with purpose, but the machine that had failed her before now became her undoing. It had promised communication, it had promised safety, but instead it had offered her as an open vessel to be read, judged, and measured. The ritual had begun, and she did not understand it, but she felt its cost. Her memories were no longer hers, her thoughts no longer private. And the worst part was that they believed this was justice, a response not of cruelty, but of order, by their laws, by their customs. This was balance. This was how insults were erased, not through punishment, but through the complete taking of self. When it was over, the strands of light vanished, the pedestal went dark, and the Xelari leader stepped back, his lights now calm and blue again. But Elia no longer felt whole. She stood there in the golden silence, her eyes open, but distant. The door behind her opened once more, and the guards waited to return her to the ship's entrance. She walked with them, without resistance, without word, the translator still silent, as if mourning what it had done. The ship's corridor felt longer now as Elia walked between the same guards who had led her in before. Their movements unchanged, their silence just as cold, but something inside her had shifted, something. She could not name. Her steps were slow, but steady, her eyes forward, but unfocused. Her body moved through the motions, but her mind was still lost in the golden room, where her memories were taken, where her voice was never heard. The translator hung around her neck like a dead weight, its surface dull, its light gone. The device that once gave her courage now felt like a chain, a mistake, a betrayal. She reached up to touch it again, fingers brushing the cold metal gently, like she hoped it might whisper back an apology or an explanation, but it remained silent, not even a hum, not even a flicker. When she reached the exit ramp, the air changed, once more cooler, thinner, more human. She stepped into it with a strange kind of relief, as if some part of her had been waiting for the difference between their world and hers. The Xelari guards stopped at the door, offering no farewell, no signal, no color. The ramp lowered slowly, and she stepped back onto the space station floor. The people who had watched her leave were still there, but quieter, now less certain of what they were seeing. The live feed had ended without notice. The screen had gone dark, and the voices in the control room had grown confused. She walked toward them, without speaking, her eyes low, her suit still white, but stained now, faint patterns across the sleeves from the golden lights that had scanned her soul. Admiral Corrin stepped forward, the one in charge of the mission, his voice soft and careful as he said her name, Elia. She looked up, but said nothing, her mouth opened for a moment, then closed again. No words, no breath that could carry them. She stood there facing him, surrounded by engineers, scientists, commanders, and friends, all waiting to hear her story. But the silence around her was heavier than any truth she could give. They took her to the medical wing, first standard procedure, after first contact tests, scans, reports, but the doctors found nothing wrong. Her heartbeat was slow, but stable, her mind alert, but distant, her body unharmed, at least on the surface. She answered no questions, gave no details, just nodded when asked simple things, nodded again when told to rest, and then sat in the quiet of her room with her back against the wall and her eyes on the stars outside. The translator was placed on a silver tray beside her bed, disconnected, powered off, useless. She stared at it for hours, the same way someone stares at a grave, not out of hate, not out of love, but out of something deeper, something sad and final. She remembered every word she had tried to say, and every way it had failed her. The shape of the room, the faces of the Xelari, the images that had been pulled from her without permission, like pages torn from a book thrown into fire. A day passed, then another. The reports kept coming in. Technicians analyzed the data. The logs showed no errors, no corruption, no fault in the software. The translation had been clean, they said, perfectly executed by the system, no cause for alarm. They said the misunderstanding must have come from cultural layers, too complex, too deep for any machine to process. But by then the damage had already been done. Earth's leaders sent messages to the Xelari asking for clarification, asking for details, but the aliens offered no response, no message, no reason, just silence wrapped in official channels. Their ships returned to their own space, and the ambassadorial mission was considered complete by their laws, by their rituals, by their silence. But for humanity the mission had only just begun. Across networks and stations the news spread, fast headlines filled with questions, experts debating the meaning of what happened, theories growing louder as the truth remained buried. Elia became the center of a story. She could not control, a symbol of something no one fully understood. Some called her brave, some called her broken, but none could speak the words she had locked away. She finally left her room on the third day dressed in black. Without the translator the halls of the station felt emptier, now quieter, even as people watched her pass with quiet respect. Her name whispered like a prayer or a warning. She went to the observatory and sat alone looking out at the stars, the same stars she once believed could be bridged with machines and science and hope. A young officer approached holding a tablet with a message from Earth asking if she was ready to speak to the press, to the people, to the council. Elia looked at him, then at the stars, then shook her head. Not yet, not like this, maybe never. He nodded and left her alone again with the stars and the silence. Inside her chest something still ached, not from pain, but from absence from the part of her that had been seen and taken and never returned, and as she watched the sky shift slowly, she whispered the first words she had spoken in days, not to anyone, not even to herself, just to the stars. I did not mean to lose myself. The stars outside the window burned brighter now, or maybe it only felt that way to Elia, who watched them from the edge of her silence. 3 days had passed since her return, and still she had not spoken to the press, to the council, to the people who asked for answers. But her silence was not weakness. Her silence was a decision, a shield, a boundary against a world that wanted to turn her pain into data, into politics, into headlines. Earth had changed since the mission. The peaceful silence between stars was now filled with a tension that could not be ignored. Reports flooded in from military stations, border patrols, and allied systems, all repeating the same question: what happened to Elia? And why had the Xelari said nothing? The mission logs had been clean, but the look in Elia's eyes told another story, and the translator's failure could no longer be trusted to explain away the damage. In the capital city of Earth, the United Planetary Council gathered for an emergency session. Leaders from every nation, colony, and orbital city came together in a dome of glass and steel floating above the oceans of New Asia. The room was filled with voices, but none louder than that of Admiral Corin, who stood before them with Elia's report in one hand and fire in his eyes. He told them about the mission, about the silence that followed, about the translator that failed without breaking or blinking. He told them what Elia could not say, what no one wanted to believe, that humanity had reached out in peace and received a wound instead, that an innocent woman was taken and used and returned without reason or apology, that trust had been broken not by war, not by weapons, but by ritual and misunderstanding masked as diplomacy. The council listened, and the decision was made not in anger, not in vengeance, but in something older, in the instinct to protect one's own humanity. Would not strike first, but it would no longer stand still. 3 ships left orbit that same night, warships built for deep space travel, armed not for destruction, but for demonstration. They were fast, silent, and shaped like the bones of long-forgotten sea beasts, dark and sharp and powerful. Each ship carried the same message, encoded in every known alien language and carved in human voice across the stars. We come not in war, but in warning. Harm one of us, and you answer to all of us. The fleet moved quickly, crossing sectors of neutral space and approaching the border of the Xelari realm. Every beacon they passed repeated the message. Every satellite carried the words, until even the quiet corners of the galaxy had heard the voice of Earth, not a voice of machines or translators or filtered emotions, but the raw sound of a people who had lost something they were not willing to lose again. The Xelari responded at first with silence, then with a single vessel sent to intercept the human fleet. The 2 ships met near the edge of the Persei line, a region of space marked by glowing storms and dead stars, a place where peace had always been fragile and unspoken. Aboard the human lead ship, Captain Mara Vey waited for the alien signal. Her crew ready, her systems armed, but her words prepared for something more than fire. She opened the channel and repeated the message one more time, her voice steady, her tone firm. We want no blood, but we want respect. We want no revenge, but we want truth. Your silence is your answer, and we will answer in kind. The Xelari ship hovered in silence, its lights dim, its message unreadable. Then at last a signal was sent not in symbols, but in spoken words shaped awkwardly. Through an artificial voice the message was short, but clear. We misread her, we misread you. We did not know she came. Without challenge we regret her suffering, but our laws were followed. No crime was seen, no punishment intended. We will speak again soon. It was not enough, not yet. But it was something, a crack in the wall of silence, a seed of regret planted in soil made of ritual and pride. The human fleet paused, held its ground, and waited, not for surrender, not for explanation, but for recognition, the kind that could only be earned by standing firm. Back on Earth, Elia sat in the observatory again, her eyes on the same stars, but her thoughts somewhere else. When the message arrived, she read it slowly, her fingers tracing the words, her heart neither angry nor satisfied, only quiet. She knew it would not heal what had been done, but it meant she had been heard, even if only for a moment, even if only through pressure. She stood and walked out into the light of the hall, her steps stronger, now her shoulders straighter. She did not carry the translator this time. She did not need it anymore. She had become the message. She had become the warning, and the promise, the voice of one, now echoed by many. And as the stars watched in their ancient silence, humanity moved forward, not in war, but in strength, not in peace, but in unity ready for whatever would come next. The stars above the Persei line blinked like cold fire, watching silently as two great forces stood at the edge of each other's space, one of flesh and metal, one of scent and color, one born of earth and blood and memory, the other ancient and ritualistic, speaking in patterns no human heart could fully trust anymore. The human fleet held its position, 3 ships, strong their engines, quiet their shields, humming like deep breath, their message clear and steady, pulsing through space like a heartbeat that refused to stop. We do not seek war, but we are not afraid of it. Inside the lead ship, Captain Mara Vey stood before the main screen, her hands folded behind her back, her face calm but firm. Around her the crew waited, watching the Xelari vessel that floated like a shadow across the void, its lights shifting slowly, no weapons drawn, no movements made, just the strange dance of red and silver across its surface, a language of tension and decision. They had waited 3 days for a reply from the message sent from Earth, a message backed not by machines, but by truth, the truth of what happened to Elia, the truth of what was taken and never returned. The Xelari had answered in their own way, regret, without guilt, words shaped by law, but not by empathy. It was not enough, it could never be enough, and now both sides stood on the edge of a choice that would shape the future. A second Xelari ship arrived, then sliding into formation beside the first, its design older, its hull marked with ancient symbols that even the translator systems could not read. The crew looked to Mara, waiting for a command, but she gave none. Instead, she watched the screen as the new ship opened a signal path, a silent channel of light that shimmered between them like a string pulled tight by invisible hands. Accepting it was a risk, denying it was a challenge. The bridge grew still as Mara stepped forward and opened the channel, her voice the only sound in the room. "This is Captain Mara Vey of the human vessel Orion. We are here to speak, but not to beg. We are here to listen, but not to forget." The silence after her words was long, deep, and echoing. Then it came, a voice not like the one used before this, one softer, shaped better by the Xelari translators, still strange, but more focused, more human. "We acknowledge the harm, we acknowledge the loss. We do not see it as crime, but we see it as wound. Not all wounds bleed, some simply remain." The crew stared at the screen, unsure what to feel. The words were not apology, not fully, but they were something, a shift in the pattern, a breach in the wall. Mara answered with words sharp and clear. "Your laws are not ours, your rituals are not ours, but your actions had cost, and now your silence has weight. Do you come to speak or to stall?" The voice returned slower, this time heavier. "We come to remember the event as you remember it, to relive the moment as you lived it. We request the presence of the one who was harmed. We request the presence of Elia." Mara's eyes narrowed. The request was unexpected, bold, perhaps dangerous. She turned to her communications officer. "Open a line to Earth, priority code." Read the message. Was sent within minutes. The response came from Admiral Corin, his face pale under the artificial light. "She has agreed. She is already on her way." Hours later, Elia stepped onto the Orion. Wearing no formal suit, no translator, no badge of title, her presence was her language, her body was her truth. The crew stood aside as she passed, quiet, respectful, unsure how to greet someone who had become more than just a person, but a symbol of everything they now stood for. She entered the meeting chamber where the Xelari projection awaited. It was not a live being, not fully, only a light form, a presence shared through tech unknown to human science, but still real, still sharp with scent and tone. Elia stood before it, her eyes steady, her voice quiet. "You took from me something I did not offer. You saw weakness where there was trust, and you called it ritual, but I call it theft." The Xelari form shifted, its lights moving faster, its scent changing like heat through cold metal. The voice returned. "We did not intend damage, but we now understand. You were not prepared for our way. Your pain echoes beyond you, and so must our answer." The projection shimmered, then split into lines of energy that moved toward Elia, but she did not step back. She stood still, letting the lights surround her, not touch, not take, only show, only share. This time her memories were not pulled, they were displayed by choice images of the chamber, of the moment of her silence, all shown not as punishment, but as proof. The Xelari watched not through eyes, but through presence, through pattern, through weight. When it ended, the voice returned. "We see what we did not before. We name it now, not as crime, but as failure of respect. We will write this into memory and never forget this shape of harm." Elia gave a single nod, then turned and walked away. Her message delivered, her presence enough, her pain no longer just hers. The reckoning was not fire, it was truth. and the galaxy would remember. The hall was quiet as Elia stepped onto the stage, the air thick with the weight of eyes and silence, 1,000 people in front of her millions, more watching through screens across planets' orbitals, and ships floating in distant stars. The lights above her were soft, but steady, warm, and golden like sunrise after storm. Her steps were slow, her hands calm, her eyes forward, not with fear, but with purpose. This was not the woman who had first entered the Xelari vessel with a translator around her neck and hope in her voice. This was someone changed, shaped by something deeper than ritual or policy. This was someone who had lost something unspoken and returned not to seek revenge, but to offer warning, not to teach hate, but to make truth known. Behind her stood the banner of Earth, a wide arc of blue, green, and white, and beside it stood the admiral, the council members, the commanders, and the doctors, who had tried to explain what happened but failed each time, not because they lacked facts, but because they lacked feeling. Because some things cannot be written in reports or measured and scanned, some truths need to be spoken by the one who lived them. Elia reached the center of the platform and placed her hand gently on the podium. Her fingers steady, her breath slow. The room waited. No one moved, no one whispered. Her voice, when it came, was not loud, not forced. It was quiet, but sharp, like a blade that cuts without blood. You all know what happened to me. You have heard the official version, the mission logs, the council notes, the military response, but you have not heard me. Her words drifted through the hall, like wind through broken glass, soft, but impossible to ignore. I was trained for peace. I was trained to listen, to learn, to speak with caution and care, but no one trained me to be misunderstood. No one trained me for silence. The translator failed that day, but it was more than a machine error. It was a mirror showing us how little we understand those we claim to respect, how quickly technology becomes a mask and not a bridge, how easily trust turns to assumption and assumption to damage. Elia paused, her eyes scanning the room, her voice unchanged, her truth unwavering. I entered their ship with hope. I left it with pieces, missing, not wounds on my body, but empty rooms in my soul, memories taken not to hurt me, but to know me without my permission, and that is something no treaty can justify. She raised her hand slightly, not in anger, not in demand, but as a gesture of truth. I do not speak today to call for war. I do not speak to divide us from them. I speak because silence is not peace, and silence is what allowed this to happen. Silence wrapped in machines and procedures and protocols that failed when it mattered most. Behind her, the screens began to show images, not of the event itself, but of Earth, of faces of children in learning domes, of miners under alien skies, of farmers watching alien sons, of soldiers holding the line at distant borders. Elia continued, her voice growing warmer. We are not weak. When we show pain, we are not broken. When we name what has been taken, we are human, and that is our strength. The hall remained still, but now the silence was listening, not empty, not heavy, but open. She looked to the screens and back to the crowd. I do not need your sympathy. I do not want your fear. I want you to understand that peace built on silence is not peace, it is delay, and delay is how damage grows unseen. She stepped away from the podium, now walking slowly across the platform, not pacing, but moving with memory, every step a moment remembered. I carry what happened with me, not as shame, but as fire, fire to light the dark places where misunderstanding hides, fire to warm those who feel alone after being unheard, fire to burn through the lies that say suffering must be hidden to be respected. Elia stopped near the edge of the platform and looked into the lens, broadcasting her face across every human colony and allied world, her voice now soft again, but unshaking. I speak now, without translation. I speak with my own voice. And if there is a message to send to those beyond our stars, let it be this: we will not meet you with weapons first, but we will not be quiet. When we are hurt, we will not forget those who harm us under the mask of culture. We will not trade our dignity for diplomacy. She gave one final look to the room, then turned and walked off the stage, her path clear, her mission complete, not through victory, not through vengeance, but through voice. And across the galaxy, others watched, listened, remembered her name, not just as survivor, not just as diplomat, but as something older and stronger, as witness. And Earth would never speak the same way again.